Welcome, everybody, to a special post-game edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton, and we are coming to you from one of the coaches' booths on the press box level at MetLife Stadium for the final time of the 2025 season and the first time in the new year, 2026. And the New York Giants close out the season with a win, 34-10 over the Dallas Cowboys, and got a lot of symmetry to this one to 2004, Eli Manning's rookie year as a quarterback against the Dallas Cowboys, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Talk about Jackson Dart. I'll give you the opponents for next season. And ultimately, we'll talk coaching, and we'll also talk the draft. As of right now, we're waiting for the 4 o'clock games to finish up, and the Giants are currently 6th. They will be no lower than 6th in the draft, thanks to the Cleveland Browns' upset win over the Cincinnati Bengals with a game-winning field goal. And they needed the Cardinals to win to drop lower. That's not happening right now. They're down 30-20 to the Rams. The Jets are not going to win. That would have been another one, 35-8 losing. The one game that does matter, it's the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles tied at 17 with about 7.5 minutes to go. Commanders are driving. If the Commanders win, then the Giants will drop to 5th. So they will have the number 5 pick. The Raiders are clinched at number 1, and the Jets, if they lose, will be number 2. Now, I understand there are a lot of you, or I will just say some of you, are upset about the Giants winning today, and I get it. And I think ultimately, let's talk about that first. Just the idea of whether teams tank or whether you should be worried about your draft positioning. What I've seen with the Giants over the last couple of years and the uproar with the fan base and everything that happens and how it kind of distracts from the action that's on the field is I think the NFL should figure out a way to implement a lottery and figure out how they can eliminate this idea that there is tanking going on and the idea that if you win games, you're hurting your future. There's no debate from me with the idea that if the Giants had finished in the top 2 spots in the draft, the idea that they could trade down for more draft assets, more capital to continue to build their roster, that certainly would help. But having been around this team and been in this locker room and watching some of the younger players that are around, Jackson Dart needed this win. Jackson Dart needed the last 2 weeks. People forget what was said about Jackson Dart just the last time the Giants were here at MetLife Stadium against the Minnesota Vikings. And what was being said, he completed 7 passes for 33 yards. He's regressed. Why did they fire Brian Dable? All that stuff was not just 1 or 2 people that were out there. It was from media. It was from fans. So I know it's not representative of the entire fan base or the entire media landscape, but there is value in winning games. Now, am I foolish enough to say, or do I want to go down the level and say because they won this game today that it's going to help them to start the season? No, you can't quantify that. You cannot say that this is going to help them when they step on the field in week 1 from a standing standpoint. It doesn't. They finished in last place in the NFC East. They are going to finish either 5th or 6th in the draft order for 2026, and that's where it's going to be. But I do think it's not easy to paint it with a broad brush because you do not know how things will work out. And I've told you the story about the Andrew Thomas Bowl, formerly known as the Chase Young Bowl, and the idea that the Giants gave up that game by winning and then ultimately ended up with Andrew Thomas instead of Chase Young. Now, you can't rewrite history, but that's the way things played out. So I understand. I get it. I get it that there are a lot of you watching and listening who are upset that the Giants gave away a certain path to improving this team. And draft capital certainly would improve this team. You can get that 1 or 2 pick. You can trade it down in theory. You can get other draft assets, and ultimately you get more swings and you have an opportunity to get more players, better players in positions of need, and that's how you build a team. Well, that's not going to happen now. So ultimately, you need to be able to focus on where you go from here. I laid that out for you. That's the draft order scenario. Full story will be up on NorthJersey.com. Up to the minute story is up there now, and then you'll be able to get the final draft order when the games conclude. But that's the game that you want to watch right now. Washington, if Washington can beat the Eagles, then the Giants will be 5th overall. Washington will be 6th. And the Browns will be 7, I believe. Browns may move up to 6 and Washington 7. I'm not 100% sure. So right now where we're at, 3 minutes and 21 seconds left. Washington has the ball 2nd and goal from the Philly 6. So in good position right there, the Commanders are. So we'll get back to that in a second. I'm going to call up Tankathon and have that ready rolling here on my computer. All right, so before we get into the scene here, and it was an emotional scene, John Mara was here today, but we'll get into that a little bit. I talked about the symmetry to Eli Manning's final game as a rookie versus Jackson Dart's final game as a rookie, but we'll talk about that in a second. What is important, I think, is the schedule, the opponents for next year. Now, we don't have the dates and times, obviously, but we have the opponents and we have who the Giants are going to play. I will give you that right now. What we know, home games, Washington, Dallas, and Philly, we know. You've got Arizona, Jacksonville, San Francisco, Tennessee, New Orleans, and Cleveland. 3 potential home games against the 3 rookie quarterbacks from this season that Jackson Dart is going to be mentioned with moving forward. With Tennessee, New Orleans, and Cleveland, Tyler Shuck, Shedeur Sanders, and Cam Ward. Now, we'll see what next season brings for Sanders in Cleveland. But 9 home games next year. So what that means is one of those games is likely heading to Germany. It's been talked about the last 2 years, been hearing it behind the scenes that the Giants will be playing in Germany next year. Don't have that concrete, but that is anticipated. So one of those home games could be Arizona, could be Jacksonville, could be Tennessee, could be New Orleans, could be the Browns. I don't think they'd put the 49ers Giants there just based on how the 49ers traveled last year, but who knows? So I don't think they would put a division game there, but that's where that stands. Now, road games, same deal, Washington, Dallas, and Philly. There'll be 8 road games. Then you've got Houston, Indianapolis, the Rams, Seattle, and the Detroit Lions, because the Detroit Lions, believe it or not, finished in last place in the NFC North, and that means just like this year when the Giants had to play San Francisco as the last place finisher in the NFC West, they now have to play Detroit as the last place finisher next year on the road in Detroit. So that's where we're at with the opponents. You can get that full story on NorthJersey.com and check that out. All right, so let's talk about Washington just scored, 2:32 left. The Commanders are in. Josh Johnson, former Giant, scrambles in for 1 yard out. Extra point is good from Jake Moody. And with 2:32 left to go, Washington is up 24-17. A Washington win means the Giants will pick 5th in the upcoming NFL draft in this April. All right, so let's get to the game. Giants really controlled this game throughout. I wouldn't say the Cowboys were tanking. Dak Prescott started, played the first half, and then Joe Milton played the second half. remember last year when all we talked about was the potential for the Giants to get a franchise quarterback, and it was talked about how Joe Milton maybe was a guy that they should have traded for from New England, and I think Jackson Dart's kind of put that to bed in terms of where Joe Milton is, in terms of what kind of franchise quarterback he can be. But Dak Prescott snaps a string of 14 straight starts that led to wins for the Cowboys over the Giants. That goes back to Dak's rookie year in 2016. Again, do you really want to count this game, which didn't really feel like a regular season, full bore game like, let's say, week 2 in Dallas felt like? Sure. So you kind of have to couch it a little bit and see where it falls. But that streak is no longer. Dak Prescott has lost a game in which he started against the Giants. All right, so the post game. Very similar to when the Giants beat the Eagles here back in October. We saw John Mara get a game ball from Brian Dable, talked about his toughness. John Mara has been really announced that he has been fighting cancer and undergoing treatment in late September. In recent weeks, John Mara has stopped going to road games to focus on his health, focus on his strength, emotionally, physically. And if anybody, as I've said previously, anybody has a family member or has experienced what a cancer fight can do to an individual inside a family, it's a lot. And there are good days and bad days and really bad days. And so from that respect, it's well wishes to John Mara, continued well wishes, continued blessings to him and his family. So the scene, John Mara's in the locker room. They call John Mara up. Mike Kafka gives him the game ball. John Mara jokes that these are the kind of things that allow him to jog to his treatment rather than walk, lifts the spirits. John Mara wanted to beat the Cowboys. It's been a long time. The last Cowboys win for the Giants was in 2020 when Joe Judge was the coach, and it was in a half-empty stadium, well, similar to today. But Xavier McKinney intercepted a ball in the end zone, but Dak Prescott did not play in that game. Giants win. You talk to some of the players and what this means. Greg Van Roten revealed this as we were talking to him. We were talking to him about John Mara and what this meant to John Mara. And they talk about how it's what he represents. And John Mara, I wrote a column about John Mara's legacy and what this means to him and what he means to everyone in the locker room and this organization. So make sure you check that out on NorthJersey.com and in the print editions of the Record. Because I think it's worth reading and it's worth reminding you of the good times when things are good and the emotions of when things are not so good, and the fight that John Mara is undergoing right now. Now I talked to symmetry. 2004, Eli Manning's final game as a rookie against the Cowboys in the old stadium. Trailing in the game, the Giants march down the field. Eli Manning in a goal-to-go situation, audibles, hands the ball off to Tiki Barber. He scores in the closing seconds, and they end up winning 28-24. John Mara has told this story to me and in groups, and I've told it before in columns. I told it again in the column that I was writing today, that he remembers leaving that game in the stadium, going down the stairwell, down to the victorious locker room, and having a conversation with his father, his late father, Wellington, and Wellington looking at John and saying, I think we got our guy, meaning Eli Manning. And I thought of that conversation and that story that John Mara told and an interview that I did with John Mara back when I really first got on the beat back in 11 and 12 and 13. I had an interview with John Mara in his office at the facility. And I talked to John about his legacy, and I wrote a lot about that in the column today. But John retold that story of Wellington finally, believing that Eli was the guy back in his final rookie season. Now, to me, I thought that's a lot of symmetry to today, where Jackson Dart is the Giants quarterback, and they go out and they beat the Cowboys in the final game. Certainly wasn't as close, but Dart had the one spectacular play when he kind of turned two, as Jackson said, and flipped the ball to Daniel Bellinger. Bellinger finished the play off 29 yards for a touchdown. And I'm writing about this for tomorrow, and Ernie Accorsi once told me in a column about Eli and that I'm going to use for the story I'm writing on Jackson. And he said, sometimes when you look at Eli Manning, you can't pinpoint everything that he has, but he has magic. Jackson Dart has magic. And I asked Jackson Dart about this after the game because Daniel Bellinger said to me that he makes you believe that you can make the impossible possible. It's weighty words from Bellinger, a 4-year player in the NFL, about a rookie quarterback. And I asked Jackson about that afterwards, and you'll have that in my column. And we also have that video up on NorthJersey.com. You can check that out. But we didn't know John Mara got the game ball until we got into the locker room and talked to some of the players about it. But the scene afterwards, John Mara leaving the locker room with a lot of, I'd say dozens of family members, grandkids, siblings, and essentially leaving the building from that celebration that was in there. And for that moment, it wasn't about 4-13. It wasn't about Brian Daboll being fired on November 10th. It wasn't about Shane Bowen and failing to close out games and firing a defensive coordinator before the season was over. It was about hope. It was about promise. It was about, for one day, believing that Giants pride actually meant something again. And for all the minutia that we want to talk about, for all the things that truly matter, the wins and losses and the draft order, and will Joe Shane have a job, and will Joe Shane be fired, and who will be the next head coach? We have time for all of that. But sometimes it's worth appreciating the moment. And today, as this season ended and wrapped up, the moment was about John Mara. The moment was about the co-owner and team president who was born into this and has lived this and has rode the highest of highs with this organization at the forefront, at his father's side, knowing his grandfather started this for $500 and nowhere close to what this dream became. And yet, here's John Mara, 71 years old, in the fight of his life, as Jackson Dart said. And there is no minimizing that. Now, this is not an excuse for losing. It is not an excuse for the ineptitude of the football side of the franchise for more than a decade. This isn't that. This isn't saying that John Mara is the greatest team president and co-owner in the history of the NFL. It's not about that. It's appreciating the man and what he represents to this organization and why this touched so many people in this locker room after the game. And it's okay if you don't see that or don't even want to acknowledge that because you're angry and you spend good money on this team and this team, has let you down time and again. I get it. But there's a reason why there are those images out there of John Mara throwing chairs in the press box and being angry and upset and talking about how he wanted to fire this one and that one and fire this one and why Brian Daboll got fired on November 10th. I think the reality is that you have a symbol of a man of a franchise that means a lot to a lot of people. And this franchise means a lot to John Mara. It means a lot to his family. It means a lot to the Tisch family. And it means a lot to you, the Giants fans, All In Nation. You're all in not necessarily because of me, or because of Paul Wood, our producer, or this show. You're all in because you love the New York Giants. So how can you look at a man who has loved and lost and loved again this organization and not find an appreciation for what today meant? This isn't about crowning the Giants and talking about how the losing is over. Maybe it will be. Maybe it will be a turning point. Maybe next year, Jackson Dart and Abdul Carter and whoever they draft, maybe a Carnell Tate, maybe a Caleb Downs, maybe that player comes here. Maybe they make some smart decisions in free agency and Malik Neighbors and Cam Scadaboo get healthy again. And a new coach comes in with new optimism and finds a way to win close games. The Giants, I think, are 2-6 in one-score games this year. And maybe we are talking this time next year about a playoff game, which is what Abdul Carter said after John Mara got the game ball. And it was a little surprising to hear Abdul Carter be the one that spoke up and said, essentially, no disrespect, John Mara deserves more. This team, everybody deserves more. We deserve to be playing next week. We need to earn that back. That's the standard. That needs to be the standard, not just one game. So it was an interesting combination of things here. And I know everybody keeps asking, what is John Mara's health situation? I don't know. And you know what? It's the man's personal business. This is not a public company. This is a private company. This is his private business. He told you that he is undergoing treatment for cancer. And as I said, if you haven't been touched by it, by people you know, friends or family, or yourselves, it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. But I will tell you that they are not going to allow a man's health and his fight to get in the way of the daily business of the New York Giants. So anyone to say that, well, it's because John Mara is sick, that's why they are going to retain Joe Schoen as general manager, that's just not fair. And I think there's probably a small circle of people who even know what John Mara is going through. So I think it's separate. I think there's the football business of the New York Giants that John Mara is involved in, but I also think that this is also a personal issue for a man and the health of someone who is essentially given everything he can to the franchise that you love, that you root for every Sunday, that you scream about, that annoys you, that angers you. Let's give him the respect to get his health back and that fight that it takes. And the decisions on the football side, if the Giants feel as though in their business that John Mara is not healthy enough or well enough to be a part of those decisions, then they will make that call. They are a $10 billion business. They're doing okay from a business perspective. The football, they got a lot to get better at. But let's not lose sight of the human element here. And that was what was on display today after the game. So that's what I have to say about John Mara and the emotions after today's game. And players young and old felt it. And I think you'll probably see that video after the game again if they put that video out like they did earlier this season. But we'll just have to wait and see. So 4-13, that's where the Giants finish, and that's where we're at as far as what they can do. We got an update here. Tankathon. The Washington Commanders are going to win and beat the Eagles. So what that means for the Giants is number 5 overall for that draft pick. going to be Vegas, the Jets, Arizona, Tennessee, the Giants, and then I believe it's Cleveland and then Washington. So Cleveland will be 6 and Washington will be 7. And that's the way it's going to be. And that's where it is. I think I'm just going to tweet this out. So we're going to get that. If they had lost today, the Giants, they would have been number 1. That's where it is. And I think that's the frustration that fans have. And I get it. But you have to take the good with the bad, I guess. All right, let's talk tomorrow. Let's set the scene for tomorrow. We have to be at the facility no later than 8:30 a.m. Players will begin trickling out of meetings and going from there. I think my sense is that we may get word on Joe Schoen tomorrow. All indications that I've had, as I wrote today, is that he will be retained as general manager. Again, that could change, but that's the sense I get. I know some of you are angry about that, but that's where you are moving forward. The interview process will begin this week. So the head coaching candidates, we've talked a lot about it. I would keep an eye on the situation in Cleveland. I know you've got Sunday night to look forward to with Baltimore and Pittsburgh, and the idea of John Harbaugh versus Mike Tomlin. Does the loser end up as a free agent, as a coach? We'll have to figure that out. But that's where we're at. Again, it was an interesting and emotional day here. I get the idea that this is a missed opportunity for the Giants. They would have been number 1 overall had they lost this game. The Raiders ended up winning. So it's an unfortunate situation, but that's what's happened here. So that's where we're at. So we will have much more this week. I will be there tomorrow. Make sure you follow everything as we move along. And we'll be all over the offseason news with the Giants, which is a big one and an uncertain one. So for Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to All In all season long here, both watching on YouTube, on all your podcast platforms. We appreciate you being all in. And next up, the coaching search. And we will be all over it. So make sure you follow everything on NorthJersey.com and in the print editions of the Record. And Paul and I will got you taken care of here on All In as warranted as we move forward here with the offseason for the New York Giants. So for Paul, I'm Art. We appreciate it. And we'll talk to you at some point this week as the coaching search gets kicked off for the New York Giants.